Good morning, everyone. It's January 24th, 2019. I'm here at shtfplan.com. Brutal reality, government shutdown, is proving Americans are not prepared for a recession. My pauses is because I have started hiccuping. So, we have the longest shutdown in history going on. We all know this. But what's going on in the background? That's what I would like to know. And why are certain types of people continuing to push this anti-white male narrative? Are we going to have a civil war? With each passing day, it looks more and more like that's exactly what's going to happen. So, and financial end of things will be one of the catalysts to push us into that arena. Most Americans are not prepared for the next economic downturn or recession. And the shutdown is highlighting just how much Americans rely on others as opposed to themselves. According to the newest op-ed article by MarketWatch, the government shutdown is perfectly proving that Americans are not prepared for a financial disaster of any kind, let alone an economic recession. Many have long assumed that the government will be using their money to bail out those who get themselves into trouble. But the shutdown is proving just how little the government actually does, and just how financially illiterate Americans have become. Almost 60% of Americans have less than $1,000 in savings for a rainy day fund or an emergency. It's been 10 years since the Great Recession, and it left many Americans jobless with no money, and it appears most have learned nothing. The shutdown serves as a painful warning and preview for what will happen once unemployment rises from 50-year lows. Americans are far too dependent on others for their survival. Within just a few weeks into the government shutdown, people are struggling to cope. We hear stories about people turning to food banks to feed their families. We hear stories about people who are in dire straits because they can't get loans. We hear stories about people who can't pay their mortgages. That's not even 1 month into the shutdown. Most of us are living paycheck to paycheck, including those who work for the government. Many won't live below their means in order to save, and it certainly seems that most Americans have picked up the government's spending habits. They have also stopped saving for themselves. According to a recent Go Banking Rate survey, only 21% of Americans have more than $10,000 in savings, with nearly 60% having less than $1,000 in savings. Almost 32% of Americans have nothing saved up at all. And something most don't want to hear is that every economic cycle will end and hit a low again, despite the rosy outlook for those who wish to keep confidence high. There's nothing in history that suggests that extremely low unemployment can be maintained for an extended period of time. Indeed, it is precisely at the end of economic cycle that low unemployment rates tend to reverse rather suddenly. Now, I was around for when in Flint, Michigan, when NAFTA was signed, and it is suddenly when these downturns happen. None of those people, including myself at the time, were prepared for such a thing, and everybody they lost their asses there in Flint, Michigan, and most of Michigan itself. And here we are at blacklisted news. Shutdown woes deepen as 800,000 federal workers to miss second paycheck, and the IRS employees bail, so there goes your tax returns. And there's no signs of a breakthrough when it comes to the negotiations between Dems and Repubs. An estimated 800,000 government employees are set to miss a second paycheck on Friday. Roughly 420,000 federal employees are working without pay, while around 380,000 have been furloughed amid the longest shutdown in U.S. history. While the actual economic impacts are thus far thought to be limited, specific companies and industries are feeling the effects. Commercial airlines, for example, are facing slower demand as airports struggle with unstaffed security checkpoints, and they're losing revenue. Last week, Delta said it had lost $25 million in revenue on account of the shutdown. The hit to the overall GDP in the first quarter is also difficult to quantify. Economists have come up with a range of numbers, but they agree that the longer the shutdown goes on, the wider the damage to economic growth. Hundreds of IRS employees, meanwhile, will probably skip work as part of a coordinated protest which takes advantage of a provision which allows them to stay home if they suffer a hardship, according to the Washington Compost. The IRS offices headed into their busiest time of the year. The shutdown may result in delayed refunds and frustrating wait times, despite President Trump's promise not to delay payments. I have fielded no less than 30 to 40 calls, emails, or text messages about hardship requests from employees daily since Thursday, said Shannon Ellis, president of the National Treasury Employees Union. The Trump administration last week ordered at least 30,000 IRS workers back to their offices, where they have been working to process refunds without pay. It was one of the biggest steps the government has taken to mitigate the shutdown's impact on Americans' lives. But IRS employees across the country, some in coordinated protest, others out of financial necessity, won't be clocking in, according to Tony Reardon, president of the National Treasury Employees Union, and several local union officials. The work action is widespread and includes employees from a processing center in Ogden, Utah, to the Brookhaven campus on New York's Long Island. That according to the Washington Compost. Prospects for reopening the government were grim on Tuesday after President Trump's latest proposal to end the impasse was immediately rejected by Democrats. His plan, which includes funding for most public agencies, promised to DACA recipients, and of course funding for his wall, is headed for a vote this week in the Senate, where it is anticipated to fail. Trump maintains that he won't sign any bill that does not fund the long-promised border wall. Stretched workers are struggling. According to the University of Michigan economist Michael Gelman and 4 colleagues, many furloughed federal workers will be forced to delay paying the mortgage or credit card payments. The study looked at the effects of the 2013 government shutdown on nearly 7,000 federal workers, both those affected by the shutdown and not, along with more than 90,000 non-federal workers. The researchers found that the median worker in the study had only enough cash or other liquid assets to cover just 8 days of their average household spending. That cushion fell to just 5 days of spending just before payday. The bottom third of the group had, on average, a combined checking and savings account balance of 0 on the day before their paycheck arrived. So, the longer this shutdown goes on, and by the way, after 30 days, those federal employees can be let go without cause. Perhaps that's what the intent is. Now, we've all heard about this thing with the Catholic school kids supposedly mocking that fraud, that Indian, which has been proven to be untrue. But it's just another example how certain groups of people are trying to push for a civil war. And I venture to say that they may end up getting it by fucking with people's children. But you never know. I mean, people do tolerate government forcing them to inject poisons into their children, among other things. So, you know, the longer this stuff goes on, the longer people are at each other's throats, the more the tension builds, the more likely it becomes that we will have a civil war. So, and if you don't have your firearms, any at all, then I really do suggest, whether you're a felon or not, you get something. Ideally, you should have a couple handguns, should have a couple of rifles, should have a couple of shotguns. Now, personally, I think a good loadout is a handgun, an AR-15, and some kind of shotgun. Each of those weapons serves their purposes nicely. And it's sluts like this woman. SNL writer Sarah Beadle offers to give head to anyone who punches Covington student in the face. It's, again, you know, the kind of thing that builds tension. It's the kind of thing that that leads to major confrontation. Another sign that a civil war may not be far off are these Muslim judges. They try to enforce Sharia compliance. That's going to cause a lot of problems. And here we are back at that Nathan Phillips. He never fought in the Vietnam War. Washington Compost admits. Global inequality explodes. 26 ultra-wealthy billionaires now have as much money as the poorest 3.8 billion people. Another symptom that leads to civil war. Senator Elizabeth Warren likens an abortion to getting your tonsils yanked. And speaking of abortion, New York just passed a law, hopefully it gets stricken down, but I doubt it, that a woman would be able to have an abortion all the way up to the date of birth. We're talking about infanticide here. Somehow, killing babies is okay. But, you know, if you snort some coke or you smoke some weed, man, do you fucking belong in prison. And another thing that would lead to a massive war in the United States, or rebellion, is when they say, there's no God, there's no creator, so how could he have given you these rights? You get your rights from government. You get your rights from us. You do what we fucking say, or you are a criminal. Or you will go to prison. Your children will be taken from you and sold into sex slavery. So, you know, the tension building, the events unfolding, they're all leading to the road of civil war. Now, this is the last one I'm going to talk about. It's a great example of how the leftist media are deliberately trying to incite mob violence against white people. And I'm not going to cover the whole article. This is on DC Clothesline, or at Natural News. The fake news media of the radical left has crossed the tipping point. With their relentless attacks and fabricated smears against Covington Catholic school students, the media's journal terrorists have proven that they are deliberately inciting mob violence to poison America. Over the weekend, the bigoted, deranged left-wing media hoaxed the entire nation, falsely claiming that young students from the Covington Catholic School assaulted and harassed an innocent Native American man who claimed to be a Vietnam veteran. In truth, the man is a crisis actor provocateur with a long history of fabricating fake accusations against young white students while claiming to be the victim of racial aggression. And that racial aggression never happened. It turns out that Nathan Phillips is raising money with the help of a major big money left-wing operation and has a history of appearing in press claiming to be a victim of anti-native racism. In 2015, Phillips claimed that he was bombarded by racial slurs by students at Eastern Michigan University. Additionally, Phillips starred in a 2012 Skrillex video called Make It Bun Dem, in which Phillips does some spiritual warfare connected to a violent attack on a police officer. Not that I give a shit about an attack on a police officer. I do not. Fake news media ignores the truth and publishes lies designed to foment outrage, violence, and chaos. The media has now become a cartel of terrorists. And there's plenty of more evidence that shows we're moving in this direction. There's fake claims made by some black folks that always end up being self-inflicted, right? Well, the more of this stuff goes on, the higher the probability that, we're going to be knee-deep in blood and guts increases. So anyway, thought I'd share these with you. This video has gone on pretty long now. I hope everyone has a great day. Remember, kill the state before the state kills you.